What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2010 R56 MINI Cooper S. Today on the MINI Cooper behind me, we're going to be covering how to replace your ignition coils and spark plugs. Typically, we recommend you do these anywhere from 50 to 60,000 miles. However, if you'd like, you can always inspect them at 30,000 miles, and if they look like they're in good shape, let them run out till the 60. If they look a little dirty or a little worn out, go ahead and replace them. It's usually a common discussion online when it comes down to these turbocharged minis. But nonetheless, a couple things to look out for whenever you're considering doing this DIY is, does your car need them? So first things first, you can always pull them out and inspect the condition of the plug. There's a lot of great charts online that you can follow to see what the condition means based on how they look. Moving forward, if the plugs are getting older or the ignition coils are failing, oftentimes what you will get, which is most common, is a misfire. If you want to diagnose whether it's a coil or not, simply see what cylinder is misfiring. And if it's cylinder 1 as an example, take that ignition coil, swap it maybe cylinder 2. And if the code follows, then more than likely you have a bad ignition coil. From there, then you can move on to inspecting the spark plugs. If they look pretty worn out and tired, then it's probably time to replace them. Bad plugs can also cause poor fuel economy and poor engine performance. So just a few things to consider. But before we get started on this DIY, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this job. For this job, we're going to be using a torque wrench and a ratchet. I have a 3/8 drive for both, as well as an extension. And then the new plugs that we'll be installing, which are the NGKs, we're going to be using a 12.14mm socket. This is a magnetic Beirut socket, which will be linked in the description below, along with the parts, all available on fcpro.com, of course. And the old plugs that we're pulling out are Bosch plugs, which use a 6.16mm socket. So just keep that in mind. Sometimes the hardware may change, especially if you're removing an old, outdated plug, installing a new, updated plug. So with that, let's go ahead and get started on this DIY. All right, my good people, under the hood of the Mini here, sometimes you will often see a beauty cover over here with the Mini logo on it, usually held in by a couple pieces of hardware. Our car is missing that, but once you go ahead and remove that, you can see the 4 ignition coils up top. These are some aftermarket ones, which is why you see the red caps on them. So we're gonna go ahead and put some good OE Delphi direct ignition coils instead. To get started, you simply wanna lift up on the locking latch here. As you lift up, this will also start ejecting the harness off of the ignition coil, which then you can pull off the rest of the way. These cars use a sealed grommet, so meaning the top of the coil is sealing to the top of the cylinder head. So we don't really have to worry about any debris being in there, but it's never bad practice to look down the spark plug tube hole before you pull the spark plug out. To remove the coil, you can stick one finger through the latch here. I like to pinch the sides here too, as sometimes the plastic will open up and the coil will be stuck behind. So doing that, you pull it straight up. This is a good time to inspect your old coil if you're going to be reusing it, making sure there's no weird burn marks or any oil on it. If you see any oil on them, more than likely your valve cover gasket is starting to fail, which is no good, so you want to go ahead and replace that as well. But these look nice and dry, so we're going to go on. Now we'll take our 16mm socket on our extension and just feed it down the tube gently. Once it's securely on the spark plug, we can go ahead and remove it. You always want to do these by hand. I don't recommend any electric power tools or air tools when doing spark plugs. All right, so as you can see, no spark plug came up with this socket. This is just a regular 16mm hex. It's not a spark plug socket specifically. Some things you can use are some fuel hose. I'm gonna use a magnet socket that we're gonna be using to install our new plugs, just to fish it out. With our old spark plug out, we have our Beirut socket on our extension. These are, again, they're super cool, they're magnetic. They make it a little bit easier to pull the socket off once the plug is in place. We'll go ahead and get our plug in. Just gently set it down. Whenever I do plugs on any vehicle, I like to turn the socket in reverse, just in case the thread's pre-engaged in the incorrect manner. You don't want to cross-thread them. Then you can go ahead and start them by hand. Should feel really, really easy, nice and smooth. If you feel any binding, back it up and do it again. Otherwise, you're going to risk cross-threading your threads into the cylinder head. All right, just going to snug it up all the way by hand, and then we're going to torque them down to 27 Newton meters. And now with that, we can take our new ignition coil, press it on. Once it's fully seated all the way down, we can take our harness, plug it back in. This latch is going to close as the harness seats all the way in. If not, just reposition it and then go ahead and lock it down. Now we're going to go ahead and just repeat the same steps across the remaining 3. And with that, my good people, that is going to be a wrap for this DIY. Overall, a really easy and straightforward job on the Mini Cooper S. Definitely a good first DIY for you beginners at home. And aside from the beauty cover, we're going to call this a done job. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, or you want us to see us do a specific job on this chassis, leave it in the comment section below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.